Thank you very much, Ghislani, for a very nice interaction. It's actually a very good input to presentation what I'm gonna have, especially the phases you presented. They are extremely relevant now for the policies. And I come from a department of regional development and public sector administration. So we really do care about policies, how they affect development, especially new trends of co-working, because they are on the global rise. And I would like to present you some of the implications we have for culture and creative industries as we explore the spatial patterns of co-working spaces development in the Prague and Milan. So we have some kind of evidence from two very different cities, but I would like to firstly step by what was the general question that was behind of the idea of having a look on a development of co-working spaces in these two particular cities. I would like to then present what kind of insights we learned from the analysis, and briefly introduce some further steps how to work with what was research by the time. So we basically started with a question like, what is the development? Maybe have a look on the typology and dynamics co-working spaces have. So what kind of spatial patterns we can observe in these two particular cities? Because generally there is some scene setting by the global trends that now more flexibility in workspaces are being pursued. We see the changes in work organization itself, how it affects companies, how it affects, I would say, everyday life. And especially with these changes that are happening, we feel, and the literature actually supports it, that the distance and location is not that predominant or necessary now to make a business, and especially for culture and creative industries. So this is why the focus on all collaborative spaces have more and more relevancy. And we also see the changes of general trends, so more of a flexibility, and some of the, let's say, companies and their models of working are being hybridized to some extent. So this is why we decided it would be interesting to have a look on how the scenery changes in Prague and Milan. And the reason why we had such a selection is that both of these cities are considered of, let's say, alpha global cities. So they are really linked to a global market, and the global trends really affect. I'm just sorry that too many people gather now at the hotel. I hope it doesn't interfere with the sound. It's a livable place, collaborative indeed. So both Milan and Prague are cores of national economy. So they are really knowledge-based centers. They actually, to some extent, brain drain from surrounding areas. So the knowledge workers often reside or seek shelter and business career in these two particular cities, if we have a look on Italy and Prague. So the critical mass is concentrated in Prague, and not only in Prague, but the surroundings in the central Bohemian region when it comes to economic geography. So with this might be a bit of maybe a different perspective, but we try to have a look on a time space quantitative mapping to see how the scenery changed. We had two particular periods of 2015. So what was happening prior to 2015, then after 2015 until 2019. At the time when we had a look on that, it was actually during the pandemic, but based on the data we had available by the time, the whole pandemic situation is not really reflected here. So this is more of a driver for a further research. So we try to have a look and have a discussion on micro locations of co-working spaces, how they evolve on the urban context, and especially how the cities are having a structural change over time. When it comes to the methods, we used a local spatial autocorrelation and then a differential spatial autocorrelation. This actually allows us to see how the variable, the presence or localization of co-working space changes over time based on the relatedness of values to a neighboring, let's say, region. We have administrative units that could be linked to polygons in the map, and to make it more evident, I would like to present you the particular maps. This is actually a Milan. On the first picture on the left, we see the development of co-working spaces prior to 2015. Then at the bottom level, then is development after 2015. So we see the rapid change around the core or the center of city, but also stemming outside of the center to create actually a new center. This is visible now on the right map. This is actually the difference between 2015 and 2019, the dynamics. I will explain later on what does it have, or let's say, mean for a theoretical perspective, and also some policy implications. So we see the shift outside of the center, and that was also the idea of and pretty much happening as well in Prague. So this is pretty much the same 2015, then after 2015, and on the right, the change. So we see that the core itself in both cities doesn't play that much of a role anymore, and the location patterns shift from the very core spaces to the surrounding or suburban areas. What are the let's say the results, and to discuss them? So in Milan, we could see particularly the creation of new centralities based on real estate prices. They are lower than in the central areas. So this also means the shift of the creative class from very central regions to a neighboring, let's say, residential areas. It also is linked to new urban development projects. So we see also urban transformation that actually is dragging the co-working spaces outside of the core area. And this is also by the result of cultural and urban regeneration, as Milan is investing now a lot in urban revitalization. So this also pretty much explains why why there is a shift from core to surrounding areas. And there is also the mindset of creating, let's say, vibrant spaces or local buzz outside of the very, let's say, a busy central district. For Prague, it has some kind of a spillover effect that the boom of co-working spaces is developing through the city, but we figured out that in case of Prague, there is a very limited collocation, where we assume that co-working spaces would locate around universities or research center to really be involved in a innovative, let's say, infrastructure or framework. But in Prague, it is not the case. And what we figured out was actually what Gisela was presenting, the shift from really community-oriented co-working spaces that evolved into more of a business-oriented. So the corporate wave was very evident in Prague. So it really affected spatial patterns and changed the scenery of a co-working scene in Prague. So as the most major chains of WeWork Impact Hub were entering the local market. So these processes actually intensify the urban transformation, because it has also some kind of implications for a creative class, especially when it comes to financial economic reasons, as now the dominance of corporate wave might actually dictate the economic issues and how the collaborative spaces will actually develop in the Prague as capital of Czech Republic. So what would be the next steps? We thought that it might be useful to see some effects of disruptions. So not necessarily only COVID, but now the energy crisis and the war on Ukraine has several implications for especially Prague. So hosting, let's say, providing shelter, and so this also changes the scene. More of migration and diversity might also have some kind of implication for localization patterns of co-working spaces. Again, this might be about the changing business models. That was actually the last point that was presented by Gisela. It was about resilience. I think this will play an extremely important role in the research of collaborative spaces, and especially how the policies will respond into that. Because in case of Milan, a lot of policies and programs been introduced for cultural and urban development, or let's say to really shift from central spaces to the surroundings. In case of Prague, there is almost none of involvement of authorities. Is pretty much dominated by a market, and especially now by global chains. So that would be it. Thank you very much for having me. I hope the perspective of economic geographer was at least interesting to the debate. I really pretty much enjoyed the first presentation. I hope for a nice discussion. Thank you very much.